you know, it touches you in a way where most people can't begin to comprehend. And so, as an African American wearing this uniform, it is very challenging. And so when I listen to the panelists and I can get the vibe from the audience, it's not that they're incorrect about what they're saying.
Okay.
You know, I can't argue the merits of a lot of what has been said. I'm just saying that to bring balance to it, as you're suggesting, you know, folks do have to look at it holistically. And that other side of it is I know it gets old, and forgive me, but we sometimes wish that that same level of enthusiasm would come to bear when people talk about young brothers killing each other in the street every day, as you do when you talk about police brutality. Both are equally important, but guess what, folks? When you come right down to it, the numbers do not compare. You might not want to deal with it, you might not want to accept it, but it may just be very difficult. And sometimes I even say, as a black man, is that part of it? Is it because it's just too difficult for us to really attack? I mean, government is always easy to come after, and I get that. And there are things that we do, quite frankly, that need to be corrected. And I would never sit here and console anybody and suggest anything other than that. And by the way, we are voluntarily undergoing our own camera program. We're going to be wearing the camera as well. So, that program is starting in this district, right where we are right now. Right. So Nick, I don't want to take up all the time, but just to say, you know, there's so many things that go into this. I just hope that, you know, from venues and settings like this, that people truly work together, because it doesn't do any good if everybody's just mad at me or what I represent, and vice versa. If you really want to be collaborative in your approach, then you got to really mean it, and that involves everybody. All right,
including the police,
especially the police.
Especially the police. Jasiri X wanted to give a response to.
I think part of the issue and part of the reason is, you know, if somebody were to come up in here and shoot me, and we witnessed it, you know, and there were witnesses and we knew who did it, that person would be arrested, tried, and convicted. The same doesn't happen when a police officer shoot and kill somebody. We see them do it, we know they did it, but yet and still they're not treated in the same manner. They're not, oftentimes they're not prosecuted. You know, oftentimes they're protected by it's particularly the FOP, the police union. Oftentimes they're promoted. You know, I'll give you an example of as one hood. We met with the Pittsburgh police asked us to meet. And so, you know, we're doing all this work in the community as one hood. They said, can you come down and meet with us? We said, of course. We met with the police and they said, we would like you all to help us, help the community cooperate more with the police department. We said, well, we would like you all to help us to compel officers to testify against other officers in cases of police brutality. We have a civilian police review board in Pittsburgh, but the officers are not, no officer has ever testified before the Civilian Police Review Board in its history, and it doesn't have the power to call on officers to testify. So we said we would like you to compel officers to testify before the Civilian Police Review Board. And they said, well, we can't do that. And so we said, well, we can't help you, because it can't be a two-way street when we talk about cooperation. And so I think that becomes the issue, and that's why we get so angry about it. Although there's people like myself and people on this panel in the audience that work to stop violence in our community every day, but if we can identify a killer, we know who shot the officer, we see the videotape, and then there's still no prosecution or justice comes to somebody who's supposed to be in our community protecting and serving, I think we have a right to be angry and upset about that.
Let me ask a question I want to ask Ms. Taifa to respond to something about policy in just a moment. How many of you heard distinct differences in what was said between Commissioner Ross and Jasiri X? How many of you feel that their two statements can actually walk down the same side of the street at the same time? See, and that's what I was wondering. I didn't notice that the two of them were at odds with each other. It was that they were addressing different aspects of an issue.
However, there is a very important issue here.
Dr. Lebanon?
And that is, no, we're not, you can't count the number of police shootings and say, oh, that's what it is. our children, especially our black male children, are intimidated every single day by the police. They are stopped, they are insulted. All of this tears down self-esteem. All of this contributes to the violence. It begins here and it ends up in our communities, on our streets.
May I ask you a question? I wanted to ask you this question, but I was going to go to Dr. Haifa first. But let me get you while you're speaking. Are the activities of the police seminal in creating the violence that we're seeing, or is it tributary? Is it something that is symptomatic or causative? That's a good way of asking it.
Does anyone in this room remember Black Panthers being thrown up against a wall, being stripped naked? How long does that memory last? That is part of our culture now. It is part of who we are. You can't separate the two. You can't. Do we have rebuilding to do with the police? Absolutely. And the first thing we should do is go to these public high schools and make sure that they have the same access to police tests that the Catholic schools do. I know they practice taking tests. We don't have that opportunity, so we can't even join the club.
It's working. The microphones are for broadcast. So when you're speaking to the audience, you might want to...
I'll use my preacher voice.
Or act like your children did something really bad and you're trying to let them know.
Going back to something you said earlier, when you said the lynchings ended and then the police killings began. I'm from Washington, D.C., for those who don't know. You know, there are all kinds of museums and all like that in Washington, D.C. And despite the fact that it's been around for about a decade, I'd never been to the Holocaust Museum. So I went there. Actually, my office did a trip or whatever to the Holocaust Museum. So I said, great opportunity, let me go to it. Well, you know, it really was everything that you would think it would be, you know, never forget, you know, everything, you know. But it really got me to thinking, and I say this often when I speak because we don't really realize, you see, there's a scenario wherein you can't use the word black people in Holocaust or black people in genocide in the same tongue. It just doesn't work. But most of us don't realize the international definition of genocide, and it goes into all of the policy things that we're talking about right now. We normally think that the concept of genocide is solely just killing people, killing off all the, you know, Indians, killing, you know, just mass killings. But it's that plus the international definition, which the United States has adopted and ratified, is killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting upon the group conditions of life calculated to bring about their destruction in whole or in part, transferring children from one group to the other, taking measures to prevent births within the group. That is the international definition, and it goes on, that says that those guilty of genocide shall be punished, regardless of whether they are constitutionally protected rulers, public officials, or private individuals. That's the definition. But we don't take international law and apply it to what's going on in the streets, okay? And we really must do that. We must do what the world does. The world does that. And interestingly, it's, quote unquote, should be easier with the Genocide Convention, Attorney Michael Court, because that convention, contrary to the International Race Convention, the International Convention Against Torture, International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, believe it or not, the Genocide Convention is the one that already has what's called implementing legislation in the United States court. You can go to court with it. Why is it that we have not done that? Why is it that the lawyers have not pushed the envelope to do what William Patterson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary Church Terrell, and 90-something Roosevelt and others did in 1951 when they charged the United States with genocide. Why is it? I submit that it was, okay, because of the other court decisions that came down, Brown versus Board of Education, etc., that said, well, give us one more chance. You know, let us sit next to white children in the school, drink out of the water fountains, etc. Let's not have you take your case to the World Court. And I think we missed a golden opportunity there. I think all the violence that's going on in the streets today might have been abated if we had taken a different strategy back then. I submit that we can still do that today.
In one sentence, if you could, what would that different strategy look like? And then I want to go to Michael Cord.
Well, I think that different strategy would be the use of, in the application of international law to what we're doing now. It's fine and it's good, and we should use the Jim Crow analogy. But I submit we need to go beyond that to really show that what we're really talking about is manifestations of genocide. And this is me speaking in my individual capacity.
The thoughts of the previous host is not necessarily that. All right, now, and I wanted to ask you, and I want you to expand on this the way that you choose. You call yourself the angry black man in America, we all know what that means, but how do we manage that so that anger becomes a tool and not an impediment? And then if you would respond to what Ms. Taifa said.
Excellent question, Nick. That whole thing that I used about being the angriest black man in America was actually taken from James Baldwin during the Harlem Renaissance. He said that to be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. Right. And he was right. He is right. So that's why I use that. I'm going to directly answer Nick's question. Let me just say this. When we talk about all the rampant crime going on in the black neighborhood, and fortunately nobody here called it black on black, because that would have just blown my mind. But that's the phrase people often use. But white people kill white people on a more frequent basis, but you never hear about white on white crime. When Latinos kill Latinos, you don't hear brown on brown. It's only when black on black. But nobody said that, and I'm so glad they didn't, and I hope they don't. Now, having said that, but we talked about the rampant crime in the black neighborhood, and there is a lot of that, don't get me wrong, but you got to put everything in context. Look at American history. The laws about murder and robbery and rape didn't come on the books until the white man came here and murdered and robbed and raped and took the land and then created these laws, saying it's okay for me to do it to create this country, but after I do it and create it, you can't do to me what I did to others to get this land. That's the first thing. The second thing, when we look at these young black men committing crimes against young black men, then it's one of two reasons for it. Either one, young black men and black people in general have a genetic predisposition to be violent. That's one argument. The other argument is that today's plight is a direct result of yesterday's racism. Think about it. When you look at white kids who don't engage in this type of so-called street violence, Crips and Bloods, why does the average white kid not do this kind of violent thing? The answer is because of how they've been educated and raised. I'm sitting here next to the commissioner, next to Dr. Mark Montiel, not because I'm some genius. I'm here because the system, when I was a kid, took me out of my North Philly school in the 3rd grade, Pratt Arnold, and put me into Masterman. So now I'm in Masterman, getting all the education that these white kids are getting, now going on to college and then to law school. I'm no different from Raheem, who sat next to me at Pratt Arnold in North Philly. I'm no different from Shaniqua. If they had gotten the same education I got, then there wouldn't be these black people committing crimes against black people. Because I'm born and raised in North Philly. It's actually the system. When you see those young black men shooting young black men, don't point at them, point at yourself. You created that. You did that. If you had taken the shackles off of them like you took the shackles off of Michael Cord and allowed him to go to Masterman with the white kids, then they wouldn't be doing this. Nobody wants to be a criminal. Nobody wants to hurt people. They do it because there are no alternatives. And let me just wrap it up by saying this, because actually I came here to hear Dr. Mark Montiel lecture, and I came here to hear Taziri X ride. So I want to give you an opportunity. But let me just wrap up my part. When you look at these this rampant crime amongst young black men, think about the movie and the book Frankenstein, because that's exactly what it is. People see bad people and monsters and call them Frankenstein. What they don't realize is this: the monster never had a name. The monster wasn't Frankenstein. Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who created the monster, was Frankenstein. So that monster was only there because Dr. Frankenstein created it. Those young black men committing crime are only
Then we'll have another introduction. The worst fear that many prosecutors have is to walk into a courtroom and see a slender, belocked brother standing at the defense table by the name of Michael Kors. How do you resist that kind of reasoning? How do you resist that kind of reasoning? Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined. I saw many individuals seeing a young man coming up wearing a hoodie, and they were trying to wonder who he was, because it didn't say PhD on the hoodie, but inside of that hoodie is the host of HuffPost Live and BET News and the political correspondent for CNN. He is on his way to Ferguson to handle the business of the nation and to bring back to us the kind of reports that we need. And the author of the book Beats, Rhymes, and Classroom Life. Please make welcome Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. We've had a thoroughgoing discussion, Dr. Hill, and all of our panelists agree that the solution to the problem is yours and you should fix it. In your absence, they were all waiting to hear what you would say we need to do to address what we're seeing in our society in the way of youth violence, particularly in our own community. The microphone is yours, sir.
I appreciate that. Free the land.
Free the land.
Free Mumia.
Free Mumia.
Free them all. It's funny, let me take a step back, and I apologize for being late. I'm literally coming from New York to be with you all before I head out to Ferguson in an hour or two. I was thinking about young people, and I was thinking about our community, and I was thinking about it against the backdrop of Ferguson, because in so many ways, Ferguson becomes a case study in every single problem, darn near, that we face here in urban America. When we got to Ferguson a few hours after Michael Brown was killed by police. And the thing that I noticed was that he was laying on the ground, no cover on him, no sheet, no medical attention probably. I mean, no protocol that you do with somebody when they're killed, whether they're innocent or guilty, ain't even a point at that level, right? He's just laying out there. And people standing around watching this spectacle and violence of the state against him. And the first thing I kept thinking is, it's like he don't belong to anybody. They let him out there like nobody loved him, like he had no family, like he had no community, like he had no country, like he had no citizenship to which he was entitled. There was a sense of disposability. And it's that notion of disposability that I'm going to talk about just for a minute, and I promise I'm going to get his mic back, because I want to hear this Syriac, that's what I came for. And not just rhyme, I want to hear this brother talk, because he's brilliant, as is everyone else up here. Thank you. You know, disposability is the idea that our children aren't worth protecting, that our streets aren't worth protecting, that our votes aren't worth valuing, that our bodies aren't worth honoring. This idea of disposability is so deeply entrenched into our consciousness that we even begin to kill each other because we see each other and value other people's lives more than our own. I see you, I see myself, and because I see myself, somehow that makes me more inclined to kill rather than less. There's nothing more counterintuitive than that. It's that backwards kind of logic, right? I love the devil because the devil gave me nothing. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. So, for me, the problem is partly one of investment. The state has not invested in our communities in a way that doesn't show that we are not disposable. First-class jails and second-class schools is our reality. Michael Kors just talked about that, right? Had he gone to Masterman, or had he not gone to Masterman, where would he be? If you don't go to Central, or even better, engineering and science, where would you be? My old school. You know, you should... You go to Dobbs? Hey, and that's the point, right? We've accepted as common sense that your zip code determines your destiny. That the school you go to determines whether or not you have access to a good job. That's a fundamentally corrupt, twisted policy. So by the time you get to be Michael Brown at 18, you've already navigated 18 years of a system that has shown that your body and your education is disposable. So then the police finally get there, and there's not an arrest. There's not even a police officer on the scene properly. Why does that matter? Because our children die every day, and there's no police response to it. If they don't get to the crime scene quickly enough, they don't investigate quickly enough oftentimes. And that's not to say that there are issues that we have in our own community about what to do when somebody gets shot, don't get me wrong. But nevertheless, there's a sense that black death is normal. I work in the news every single day. Black people die in Chicago, I have to make them make a headline on that. We had 38 deaths one Monday, and they were like, yeah, but Kim Kardashian put out this Instagram, man. We got to leave with that. And they weren't joking. They weren't joking. Black death is normal.
Yeah, that's true.
Because we are rendered disposable. That is in fact the problem. And so, and one more thing. So then, we then get to this idea that black folk got to be perfect to be useful, right? A whole bunch of bourgeois middle class black folks saw that video when Michael Brown was stealing that cigar allegedly, and they were like, oh shit, well, he stole a cigar. As if that's a capital offense. White folks stole billions from us and never got a slap on the wrist. Somehow stealing a cigar makes you worthy of extradition back. So there's the kind of disposability we have in ourselves that unless our kids are perfect, unless they go to Masterman when they get shot in the street or beaten by police or not investigated when they die, somehow that they're worthy of what they got because they weren't perfect, as if we ever were. So we have to shake off that disposability politics ourselves, and we have to organize, and we have to march, and we have to realize that black life is worth it. Kiese Lemon said, all of us are worthy of good love, healthy choices, and second chances. That's our children too.
Joined by Dr. Hill. This is what we want to do. I know that Commissioner Ross is going to have to make his way, but we are in the room with some extreme talent in the form of Jasiri X, who is a world-class poet and who has a skill that recommends him to us tonight. And I just don't think it would be beyond the pale of my prerogatives to invite him to give us just a small performance this evening. But before we do that, I'm going to ask that all of our panelists will turn their attention now to specific positive directives toward fixing, changing, or healing. And we'll start with Commissioner Ross. A magic wand is waved. You're the commissioner of the city of Philadelphia.
Talk it up.
What do you do to bring about the kind of changes that we've been discussing tonight? And then after Commissioner Ross, I would like to ask our good brother from Pittsburgh, Jasiri X, to come to this microphone and to share some of his talent with you.
All right, so, I mean, I don't think that there is a panacea, but first and foremost, I touched on it before. I mean, there has to be a willingness on the part of everybody to truly work together. I mean, look, we have a lot of issues in policing. We know that. I mean, the things that were just spoken about, I mean, the commissioner went to Ferguson himself and talked about how horrible the optics were. I mean, so that's not something us against them. You know, I mean, a lot of things, issues that people talk about, we share them, we understand them. And again, it's not a black-white thing in this world like people want to make it to believe. They want to make it out to be, and policing is really not necessarily. But I think to go even beyond policing, mentor, reach back and pick somebody up. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I know I have a mentee. He was one of the millennials that was there the other day, and he was a guy I've been with since he was in high school. And he went on to college, he graduated, and you know, he's thinking about running for public office. The point I'm trying to make is that everybody's got to be willing to reach back and help somebody, you know, and it's as fundamental as that. Mentor, reach back, big brothers, big sisters, anything like that, but we don't turn our back on one another and realize that we all play a role, just as this is. We are brothers and sisters keepers because we really are.
While